So what is this again?
The Georgia secession flag.
It's the Georgia secession flag. So this is Georgia's own state flag.
And some people called it the Georgia Republic flag because Georgia was an independent republic for 26 days before they joined the Confederacy.
This should be your future flag?
That's what that man over there said.
Yeah. What do you think?
I agree with him. I agree with him. The way things is going, we're going to have to do something.
So is it time to
I think it's time
rebel
to do,
again?
It's time to do something. Time to do something. If we don't get it back in November, well, we need to try to elect the right officials into government office. We need to get rid of wokeism, cancel culture, and all these things that's killing America.
Do you think that you can get a fair election in Georgia?
Well, I think now we can, hopefully. Yeah.
Why now? What's changed?
The older laws.
So I'm down in Georgia with these grown men dressed up for civil war, and they're all excited about this new voting law in Georgia, a law they're certain will allow the South to rise again. The law is called SB 202, and it's 98 pages of breathtaking obstacles to voting. I mean, they've made mail-in voting nearly illegal. They've shuttered ballot drop boxes. They've cut Sunday black souls to the polls day. And if you hand someone a slice of pizza or a bottle of water while they're waiting in line for 5 hours, you'll be charged with a felony crime. I'm not kidding.
In Georgia, pizza is an act of civil disobedience.
I've been covering vote suppression for The Guardian, BBC, Rolling Stone for 2 decades, and I've never seen anything like it. But what shook me up? I'm going through the bill, and I see a landmine planted in it. It's barely noticeable. For the first time in Georgia history, any voter can challenge an unlimited number of other voters and stop their ballots from being counted. And when I say unlimited, I mean unlimited.
Welcome to our live taping of Gaslit Nation. For our listeners and our virtual audience, drop your questions in the chat. We are joined today by the great Greg Palast. Greg Palast is known for his investigative reports for The Guardian and bestsellers including The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Palast has just released his must-watch, extremely powerful, compelling film about the latest attacks on the right to vote. It's called Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitman, narrated by Rosario Dawson and produced by Martin Sheen. Leonardo DiCaprio just released the film for free, streaming on his site, saveyourvote.org. And what I love about your documentary, Vigilantes Inc., is that it shows what I've been saying on Gaslit Nation for a million years, which is American history is authoritarian history. And that's the reason why non-white people, especially Black people, were very early in taking people like me seriously. When I was ringing the alarm about Russia's attack on our democracy in 2016 and that Trump's going to be a dictator, Black people, non-white people were like, yeah, we know, because that's American history. So your film is essential because we're living in an age of weaponized information warfare where the MAGA Republican Party, the KKK Republican Party, backed by the Kremlin, is deliberately flooding the zone with shit, as Steve Bannon says, to exhaust us, demoralize us. And so we can't act. We don't know what to think, which direction to go. Every day there are new crimes, new scandals. And your film, Vigilantes Inc., is a brilliant grounding exercise where you watch it and you beautifully lay out the facts. You show the legacy of history, how we're living with it today, the reincarnation of the KKK in Brian Kemp and so many others. And so thank you for making this film. Thank you for coming on my show. And I'm just urging all my listeners, please watch Vigilantes Inc. It is free. It is free. And it belongs in the Smithsonian. So welcome to Gaslit Nation, Greg.
Thank you. I hope you're not suggesting I belong in the Smithsonian. Okay, well, thank you so much. You know, your words are kind, but again, it's a movie, but it's also a movement. The point of Vigilantes Inc. is to quickly spread a warning, which is why Leonardo DiCaprio created this site for us, saveyourvote.org. And it is there where you can watch the film for free. But it's not just called, it would be watchthisfilm.org, but it's not. The reason it's called Save Your Vote, by the way, it is not save my vote, not save Allison's vote or Harry's vote. It is save
Your Vote. So remember the Y when you put it in, saveyourvote.org. You start out first, it's there. You can check your registration to find out if you've already been challenged or purged or if anything's gone wrong. Second, it gives you the 866 number for the lawyers, the flying teams of lawyers. Hopefully not on election day. Please go in and vote early in person if you can. I know I can't. I have to mail in my ballot. But then we have that information how to stop yourself from being removed from the voter rolls and and make sure that your ballot gets counted. And finally, or you can start with it, it says watch Vigilantes Inc. for free. So you can stream it right there for nada. And again, it's saveyourvote.org. Or if you go to my website too, which is I'm Greg Palast, GregPalast. You go there for free. It's right on your screen.
I want to ask you, Greg, your documentary reminds me of Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, who you obviously know. And Killers of the Flower Moon is based on the nonfiction book by David Graham.
Yes.
I saw in the credits that DiCaprio's father, George, was involved in your film. Mm-hmm. Could you also work with the DiCaprios to create an Oscar bait real-life crime thriller directed by Scorsese based on your film? Because the entire time I was watching it, I was like, oh, this is Killers of the Flower Moon.
Well, guess what?
Tell me.
Yes. The answer is we're almost done with that one. I had to take a pause to do this film. But yes, I am doing with George DiCaprio, is Leonardo's father and a great documentary producer. Mm-hmm. I hope you'll get a chance to see his Ulysses Grant documentary.
Wait a minute. No. Stop right there. You're telling me that 3-part docudrama that Leonardo DiCaprio was an executive producer on was directed by George DiCaprio?
No, George is also an executive. He's a producer.
Wait. No. You need to understand something. Here at Gaslit Nation, Ulysses S. Grant is known as my boyfriend. I am madly in love with Grant because he was the original Nazi hunter during a time of vacuum of power when it comes to the feds. So I was just on Tristan Snell's podcast. He was the former prosecutor that took down Trump University. He wrote a book, Taking Down Trump. And I was like, Tristan, you got to watch this film, Vigilantes Inc. And I was like, Tristan, where the hell are the feds? We've had the National Guard come in and on and on and on. And so back to Grant. Grant is the model to get through where we are today. My mind is exploding in so many different directions.
Yes.
I'm so excited and starstruck. Okay, but go on.
You did ask a question that I wasn't expecting, and the answer is yes. So what is happening is Leonardo and George DiCaprio are producing the nonfiction follow-up to Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm the filmmaker, my same director that you saw in this film, in Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitman. That's the brilliant David Ambrose. He's been directing the follow-up. The follow-up film is called Long Knife, The Osage Nation, Coke Oil, and the New Killers of the Flower Moon. And for those who've seen Killers of the Flower Moon, where the Osage Nation, at least 200 Osage Indians were murdered by their white guardians and white burghers of Oklahoma, 1 to 200. We don't know the exact number, unfortunately. They were murdered for their oil. But that story, directed by Martin Scorsese, will be ends in 1924. I've worked with that tribal group for many, many years, and I said they didn't end in 1924. We're in 2024. So the DiCaprios are producing my documentary, probably will be presented by Martin Scorsese, so he's involved too. Everyone, the whole Killers gang is helping us put out the next 100 years of the story of the Osage Nation. And it is Osage. It was by stealing Osage oil that the Koch brothers made their first billion. And so we're going to tell the story of Coke Oil. We're going to tell the story of the tribe. So exactly what you're hoping to happen. We're almost done with the film, but we had to put it aside because what I saw happening with this election, and we all agreed to pause our work on the Osage film to do this film, Vigilantes Inc., because we see, now get ready for this, first of all, in 2016, we don't know of any vigilante challenges in the country where people were systematically trying to individuals removing people from the rolls. Now, understand, this is a whole new thing. What do I mean by vigilantes? This is not, we had one, you'll see one woman in our film who challenged the rights of 32,000 of her neighbors. She works for Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was running for vice chair of the Republican Party of Georgia. She personally challenged the right to vote of 32,000 people. Who is she? Is she the cops? Is she the government? No, she's a self-appointed vigilante. She's a self-appointed vote fraud hunter. She's saying all these 32,000 people in her county were fraudulent voters, fraudulently registered. Now, again, it's like saying, hey, Andrea lives in Brooklyn. Well, you say you live in Brooklyn, but I'm going to say you don't live in Brooklyn. You shouldn't be allowed to vote or have your ballot counted. That's what's happening. But in 2016, there were none of these vigilante vote challenges. In 2020, we had 88 vigilante vote challenges, all in the state of Georgia. That's where the GOP and this group, True the Vote, took this vigilante game out for a test drive. And that's where that woman challenged 32,000 people. That you'll see her in my film, Vigilantes Inc. Again, you can stream it for free at saveyourvote.org. And now we went from 88 vigilante challengers trying to overturn the election, trying to stop the count of votes. And it's now gone. Are you ready for this? True the Vote, which is the Republican Party front group challenging voters. And by the way, almost all of them are voters of color. It's gone from 88 challengers in 2020 to this year, 40,000 challengers have already signed up with True the Vote. And that's one organization. There's about 24 of them. That's the biggest. The other thing is they have, as of 6 weeks ago now, as of 6 weeks ago, they had already challenged 851,000 people as of 6 weeks ago.
851,000 people
have already been challenged. I would say 97% roughly have no idea that they've been challenged and that their votes are unlikely to be counted in this election if they even get their ballots. Now, how does this happen? Because every state in America has some type of challenge provision where I could say, I know that Andrea is not a legal voter. She's not a U.S. citizen. There's always been these challenge laws on the books, most of it left over from the Jim Crow era. So what's happened is that these dormant laws, and now in places like Georgia where it's not dormant, they literally passed SB 202 a couple of years ago, which said that any voter can challenge an unlimited number of other voters in their county. Any voter can do that. And we're seeing this mass challenge happening in Arizona, in Michigan, Wisconsin, Texas, and of course, in the swing state of Georgia. So again, I want to warn you, the NAACP, as you'll see in Vigilantes Inc., the president of the NAACP, Gerald Griggs, you may know him as the guy who put R. Kelly in prison.
God bless him. God bless that man.
Yeah, so Gerald Griggs said, well, we're expecting, are you ready for this? In just Georgia alone, 300,000 to 400,000 challenges are coming in. 300,000 to 400,000 people are and it's not just any people, it's suspiciously dark-skinned people, suspiciously young people. In other words,
all the Jose's.
Yeah, voters of color, and the color is blue. And I'm not partisan. I'm not going to tell you to vote for Trump or Harris or Stein or whatever you want to do. All I'm telling you is that I'm working hard to make sure that the voters, not the vigilantes, choose our president. So let me give you one more example from the film. Which I'm glad, thank you for saying you loved it. I kind of like it myself, but I do. I wouldn't have made it either. One vigilante vote challenger you'll see in the film actually dresses as a vigilante. He has the cowboy boot, the cowboy hat, and he actually has a holster with an old Wild West pearl-handled 6-gun in it, and he made sure that we knew it was loaded. And this guy, you may listen to him and think he's a nut. Well, he may be a nut, but he's also chairman of the Republican Party in Southern Georgia, chairman of the Republican Party. All 88 challenges that we had 4 years ago, everyone was a white Republican operative, every single one. And again, I'm not being partisan. I'm reporting the facts, man. This is Greg Palast. I'm a reporter. And so this guy challenged 4,000 of his neighbors in Columbus, Georgia, which is where Fort Benning is based. Well, it turns out the vast majority of the people he challenged happened to be, you'll be shocked to hear this, African-American soldiers. If an African-American soldier was sent to Germany or to Syria or to Texas or California, and you're a black soldier at Benning, this guy was going to take you out. And how do we find out about that? Because he picked one of the people he challenged was a very bad choice for him to challenge, which was Major Gamaliel Turner, who was out here in California at Fort Hueneme, because after the war in Ukraine, he was sent to California. He's one of America's, Pentagon's top experts on what's called warfare of the future.
Wow.
He's an African-American soldier, and he says, career military, he's 70 years old when he says, where's my ballot? It's a couple days before the election. Where's my absentee ballot from Georgia? So he calls up the Columbus at Fort Benning. He says, where's my ballot? And they said, well, Mr. Turner, you've been challenged. And Turner said, what does that mean? I've been challenged. We can't send you a ballot. You've been challenged. And he said, so what do I have to, how do I unchallenge? How do I challenge this challenge? They said, well, all you have to do is come in to our office and prove you're an American citizen, give us proof of your address, and we'll give you your ballot. And he said, wait a minute. You're telling me 2 days before an election that all I have to do is show up 2,600 miles away? Just show up? He said, you talk to fools like that, and I'm not a fool. And he said, look, this is just another Jim Crow trick. This is just a new form of a black man having to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar in order to vote. It's the same thing. But now it's not stopping one voter. One guy sends in a list of 4,000 names, which they get from this organization, True the Vote. By the way, True the Vote, while it is challenged already this year, we now know that they've gone over 1 million challenges. Yet not one person of the million that they've challenged, if these are really illegal voters, have them arrested. Illegal voting, deliberate double registration in 2 states, or anything like that. And that's a felony crime. But it's interesting. They challenged 1 million people, but not one apparently has committed the crime. And by the way, secretaries of states, attorney generals said, look, if you have names of illegal voters, give them to us. We'll go arrest them. They never do that. They just take away their vote. So, by the way, Major Turner, as you'll find out in the film, they picked on the wrong guy because his father is the Reverend Harold Turner, co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Martin Luther King. They picked on one of the top civil rights families in Georgia. And so in the end, the major sent down, got Mark Elias, who is now Kamala Harris's chief voting rights attorney. The first time the Democratic Party has ever hired a voting rights attorney, ever. And Mark Elias flew down from Washington down to Columbus, Georgia, to go to federal court just so Major Turner could vote. Literally, they had to send someone from Washington, D.C. and go into federal court, and they got Major Turner's vote counted. In the end, the follow-up action, the major did fly 5,000 miles round trip. He also flew 5,000 miles round trip from California to be in our film, in Vigilantes Inc., America's new vote suppression hitmen. Again, I'm going to say for those who just joined, you can watch that film, Vigilantes Inc., for free at the site created for us by Leonardo DiCaprio, which is called it's called
SaveYourVote.org.
You know, I once did a comic book called Steal Back Your Vote. Unfortunately, my co-author was Bobby Kennedy, and I don't know.
Oh, man.
This is pre-worm in the brain.
Chewing on a dog didn't give you any hints that he might be.
I mean, it was, this is many years ago. But anyway, so it's SaveYourVote.org. Save your vote, not my vote.
What I love about your work, so far in this interview, you dropped a bombshell that the genocide of Killers of the Flower Moon in Osage County, that's where the Koch brothers family made their fortune from.
Yes, absolutely.
That massive crime. And so that film's in development. I cannot wait to watch it. Come back for that.
I will.
And then in this film we're talking about, Vigilantes Inc., I learned so much about American history, including that slavery was once outlawed in Georgia. And Thomas Jefferson even wrote in the Declaration of Independence a whole screed against slavery and how it has to be banned. It's immoral, it's evil. So tell us about that history and how Georgia played a role and how Brian Kemp's family is connected.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to give that finding. By the way, we have an amazing team. It happened to be an investigation and discovery by my director, David Ambrose, that it was the Kemp family that first brought Africans in chains to the Deep South, to Georgia. Now, you have to understand, this is just before the Revolutionary War. And at that time, Georgia, of all places, was the one territory where slavery was absolutely outlawed. And when we say Georgia, that's the entire Deep South. The Georgia territory included Mississippi and Alabama, Georgia, parts of Florida. So it was the entire Deep South. It's hard for people to imagine it was the South that banned slavery, not the North, but the South. And then Kemp's ancestors, they used the name Habersham at the time. Kemp's ancestors got a special dispensation from King George III. You know, the guy whose ass we kicked out of our continent? Well, before we kicked him out, he gave Brian Kemp's ancestors the right to bring in Africans. And what Jefferson, and you're saying, oh, wait, wasn't Jefferson a slaveholder? Yeah, absolutely. And there is I'm not going to cover up for his hypocrisy on this, but as explained to me by some of the people who are still some of the ancestors, descendants of the people who are at the Kemp plantation south of Savannah, that what Jefferson was saying is that once a plantation comes in, that's the end of all the small farmers. You have no choice but to compete using the same, quote, tools, in other words, other human beings. And so Jefferson actually wrote the longest segment of the Declaration of Independence was a long screed against slavery and attacking King George for allowing the import of Africans in chains. And that was taken out of it's the only part of the Declaration of Independence that was removed by the Continental Congress at the objection of Jefferson's friends, the Kemp family, or at that time they're called.
So we could have avoided a bloody civil war in America if we had kept that in the Declaration of Independence.
Yes. And remember, you had the articles. Remember, there was no U.S. Constitution at the time. And it's one of the objections that Jefferson had to the Constitution, that it did not outlaw slavery. What he wanted to do, just so his plan was to do something like the British plan, where there would be a 4-year period of transition. It's still not good enough, in my opinion, if you're still holding on to slaves.
Brian Kemp's ancestors have blood on their hands, not just for the institution of slavery, but for all that died in the Civil War.
Well, I have to say yes. And not only that, but one thing is very important. Brian Kemp, personally, the governor of Georgia, personally did not bring enslaved people to Georgia. But he's completely denied, when you talk about blood on his hands, it's money in his pocket. He's one of the richest men in Georgia, owns thousands and thousands of acres of toilet paper creating trees, the Georgia pines, which are being ground up by the Koch brothers into toilet paper, literally. And he gives them the trees to turn into toilet paper. This money all comes literally off the backs of the Africans that they enslaved. And his cousin, a woman named Janie Bance, is just furious with him that he will not admit where the family's money comes from. And worse, you'll find in the film, and this is becoming ubiquitous in red states now, that Kemp was one of the first people to sign a bill outlawing the teaching of history, where this so-called anti-CRT, supposedly critical race theory, but they call it that you will lose your job and your license as a teacher if you teach so-called divisive concepts. And a divisive concept, by the way, see this film, a divisive concept is anything that makes any student uncomfortable about their race. In other words, if you mention that the current governor of Georgia was his family brought in enslaved Africans to Georgia, you're going to lose your job as a teacher. The whole point. So he's literally making it illegal to talk about his family and their real history. He's enforcing amnesia by law. It is vile, and it's happened in Texas, and with Governor Abbott. It's happened with Ron DeSantis in Florida, and the problem.
And it happens in Putin's Russia.
And it happens in Putin's Russia, and it happens in Putin's Oklahoma too, where Oklahoma passed a law which will make the showing of my film and showing Killers of the Flower Moon not only in high schools or elementary schools, no one will be allowed to see my film under penalty. And by the way, in Oklahoma, do not only take away the teacher's license, they shut the school. The entire school goes down if you talk about the mass murder of tribes, of people of the Osage for their oil. You would literally close your school. And when I say your school, I'm talking about state universities as well. Universities will not be allowed to show my film. And this is happening around America, and you'll see this in the film. Now, how does this amnesia, how does this anti-CRT stuff deal with voting? Well, as one of the descendants of enslaved people from the Kemp family, one of the Black people said, if Griffin Lotson, he said, if you suppress history, you suppress the vote, because you have to understand the history of keeping Black people away from the polls. That's what's going on. I would also note, for example, one of the things you go back, we don't have to go all the way back to that, to the Revolutionary period. Vigilantes Inc., the reason it's called Vigilantes Inc., I call the film Vigilantes Inc., is because that was the name that the Ku Klux Klan incorporated under in 1946. In 1946, the Ku Klux Klan of Georgia came up with this plan in which they as individuals, will do the whole vigilante thing, and they were going out to challenge every single Black voter in Georgia. And in many counties, they completely succeeded in challenging each one. That was 1946. And they succeeded by doing that in electing a Klansman as governor, Eugene Talmadge. And believe it or not, we're going through all these vigilante challenges and no one's stopping them. But in 46, the FBI said, wait a minute, that's a violation of the 15th Amendment of the Constitution. So they drew up an indictment. They were about to arrest the governor of Georgia for removing Black people from the voter rolls. But the governor got lucky. He had a collision with a bottle of bourbon and drank himself to death just before they cuffed him. So he snuck out of the indictment by drinking himself to death. But here's the problem. That's 1946. To cover their tracks, the Ku Klux Klan incorporated itself into something it called Vigilantes Inc. And now the vigilantes are back. So the Klan plan of 46 has become the Trump plan of 2024. I want to repeat that. The Klan plan of 46 is the Trump plan. But here's the problem. In 46, if you're a Klansman and you wanted to stop a Black person from voting, you had to write down their name with a pen on a piece of paper and say, don't let Joe Black vote. But today, one woman sends in, she just takes an email and she just attaches a list that she gets from this organization out of Texas. These people have taken the Klan plan and they've gone from white sheets to spreadsheets, where they just literally send in spreadsheets with all thousands of their neighbors' names. And you'll see in the film, now that sounds a pretty dry story. But as you'll see in the film, which is why I think you may like it.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. So I went to the woman who challenged 32,000 people. We do this undercover work. Thank you, Zach D. Roberts, our co-producer and undercover cameraman. And we get into this woman's house, and she doesn't know who I am. So, and I show her a picture of one of her Black neighbors. Tamar Horn is her name. And I said, do you know this woman? No, I've never seen her. I don't know. She was nervous. I said, ever speak to her on the phone? No. Ever go to her house? No. I said, but you challenged her right to vote? And then she said, wait, well, I can't call 32,000 people. I can't, how can I call 32,000 people? I said, but you challenged their votes. You challenged the votes of 32,000 people. You didn't call, send a note, do anything. You just took this list and you stopped 32,000 of your neighbors having their ballot counted. And so her reaction, now you have to understand when you see the film, her house is filled with ammo and automatic weapons. Right next to her door was an AR-15 automatic weapon. And by the way, the kind of weird fun thing about it, this isn't like, I'm not in a trailer park. This woman is really wealthy. She's got this big Gone with the Wind mansion. And she's dressed up with like Nancy Reagan with the red dress and the red high heels and finely coiffed. And then she throws me out. My local camera crew got scared and they ran out because they weren't comfortable with automatic weapons. And a woman was really angry. Her husband actually jumped on me. I left that out of film because it was just over the top. Then she starts swearing at me like a sailor. I couldn't use all her language because I would lose my PG rating. So I'm chased out by this armed crazy woman screaming at me. And then I go, and then the next vigilante.
A rabid Nancy Reagan.
Yeah. Well, it's probably the real Nancy Reagan, because I think that she was, I won't go into what I think of what she was. But anyway, but all I can tell you is the next guy, then we go to Doc Holliday, this vigilante who dresses up like Doc Holliday. And again, you think he's just some goofball, but he's the chairman of the Republican Party in Southern Georgia. And he also made it clear with his 6-gun. He told us, yep, it's loaded. And it's like, this isn't going to be good, because then I had to tell him, do you know whose home you're in? He said, no.
Because you invited him to this home for an interview.
I invited him to his home for an interview. I said, do you know whose home this is? He says, no. I said, well, meet your host. And you have a 70-year-old African-American career military man come down, sit next to him. And I said, meet Major Gamaliel Turner. You challenged his right to vote. You said he didn't live in this house that you're sitting in. You're sitting in his house that you said he didn't live in, that he doesn't live here. Here he is. And the major was really worried. I mean, this is a black man in Southern Georgia, and there's a guy with a gun there who's just been tricked. And we didn't know how that was going to end up. The one thing is I mean, you'll see an old gun in a Bible, and the major's wondering what would happen if he had to grab that gun. He also had an anti-tank rocket launcher in his kitchen, but I thought that'd be a little bit much. But so you'll see these scenes. Some of them are really heartbreaking.
So
some of them are funny.
How did that play out then in being in the room with those two men? All of American history in that moment.
Well, because I'm used to this. For those who don't know me, Greg Palast, I'm an investigative reporter. I was one of the chief investigative reporters for BBC Television in England, and I was also an investigative reporter for the Guardian newspapers. So in England, we first try to get people to speak with us on camera, but if they don't, I'm allowed out of England to go undercover, to use a false front if I have to jump people if I have to literally sometimes have to hide in the bushes. But we don't accept no comment. I have to go get these people. And I can't do that in American news. American news is scared of its own shadow. So it's very, very difficult to do undercover work in the US, almost impossible. But we get the best stories that way, and also the most fun and interesting stories. But like the woman with the gun, she threw us out, and and that was a very dicey, dangerous situation. But Doc Holliday with his 6-gun, you'll see this thing where he's trying to take the gun out of his holster, and you realize this guy ain't Wyatt Earp. He ain't Doc Holliday. He's taking he can't figure out how to get the gun out of his holster. He's pulling it at his gun, but you never know how it's going to go. So it can be harrowing, but he didn't run off. Some of these guys will run. There's all kind. We always practice like, well, what if they run? What if they start and what if they start shooting? And we do have to be careful about these things. We really take this stuff seriously. But if no one gets hurt, it's a lot of fun to do this work.
So I have to ask you, Brian Kemp legalized Vigilantes Inc. to suppress the vote in Georgia, entrench his power. Mm-hmm. Vigilantes Inc. is what the KKK used to be, right?
Yes.
So doesn't this essentially make Brian Kemp a Klansman?
Well, he's using the Klan plan. But he's upped it into cyberspace. As I've said, instead of having to fill out forms and getting thousands of Klansmen to fill out a few forms, they're literally putting in spreadsheets with thousands of names.
And they're using Eagle AI.
They're using something called Eagle AI is another one of their groups. That's Cleta Mitchell, by the way, who's Donald Trump's attorney. The group that's putting out these lists that because you can only challenge in your county. So they make sure that they don't get. They screen out people like me, of course, but they'll get their vigilantes to suck down thousands of names in their county. Again, almost entirely voters of color. If you go to gregpalast.com, you'll see a short explanation of this by my producer, Martin Sheen, my favorite President Bartlett.
From the West Wing.
From the West Wing and from Apocalypse Now, Badlands, my favorite stuff, my favorite movies. So Martin it will explain it to you at the top of gregpalast.com. And it's worth seeing his comments. So yes, it's a Klan plan. And what's strange is that the federal government, was about to arrest the governor of Georgia for doing this last time. Why aren't they arresting the governor of Georgia now? And don't forget, while Georgia is always the place where they take out these various vote suppression methods, that's where they're always taken for a test drive. I've been covering Georgia for 11 years now, and that's always where each of these tricks start. But Kemp has gotten away with this, and now it's spread to all these other states, like Florida, like Texas, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin. And by the way, one of the things you can do in 23 states, including Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, as swing states, if you are purged, if your name is missing, don't argue with the lady behind the desk. In those states, you can register on election day, re-register on the spot, say, okay, I want to re-register right now, and then you give me my ballot. So that's one thing you can do. So that's why you want to go to saveyourvote.org, where it gives you this information, but also you can watch the film Vigilantes Inc. for gratis.
I'm so grateful for your work. And so my question to you is, the federal government, including Grant and the civil rights movement, Eisenhower, Kennedy, they used federal power to enforce civil rights. The National Guard was sent in when needed. Why do you think the feds are sitting back and letting our democracy burn? Like, why isn't Brian Kemp being investigated and arrested?
I think there's two things. Number one is that the Democratic Party, most of the Democratic Party and most Democratic leadership, since Nixon won with the Southern strategy, has been very reluctant to talk about what we call vote suppression, which is a fancy term for shafting Black people and brown people out of their vote. They're afraid to even bring up the subject. And that's been a big problem. And like I say, Kamala Harris, finally, for the first time, hired Mark Elias, a top voting rights attorney, for the party to protect votes. That's a new thing. And I think the other thing is, by the way, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who I just did a kind of command performance of our film for him, and he told Kamala Harris and President Biden, you got to watch this film. So if Jesse Jackson can force the president, Kamala Harris, to watch this film, I think you can too. But I just want to let you know, it is a movie. Bring your popcorn. It's entertaining.
I compared it to Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah. By the way, it's not one of these PBS documentaries with a white guy in front of a bookcase, even though I'm a white guy in front of a bookcase right now.
No, you hold up a pizza and show how pizza has been criminalized, because you're not allowed to give food, water, pizza to people waiting in line to vote. What Brian Kemp is doing in Georgia is criminal. He needs to be arrested. You show in your film how non-white activists are being criminalized just for registering their communities to vote. They're being threatened with felonies. They're being threatened with several years in prison. And that led to one Black woman dying by suicide. Another, her health took a hit. The authoritarian pressure that these people are put in the pressure cooker, they need to be rescued. There needs to be a rescue operation for Georgia, because Brian Kemp is acting like above the law here. Like, there are laws on I know he's using legal warfare, just like Putin did to consolidate power, just like Orban did to consolidate power. These are authoritarian tactics. And Biden, who ran in 2020 on the soul of America, and now in this election, the Democrats are saying we're up against a dictator. Everyone needs to become an expert on Project 2025. The DNC was an entire week-long event on Project 2025. And yet we don't see the DOJ Civil Rights Division. We don't see Merrick Garland. We don't see the FBI, Christopher Wray's FBI, which allowed January 6th to be planned and happen out in the open. My podcast announced a January 6th coup special. We said, we'll see you after the violent coup. Well, we all saw it coming. So at a certain point, is the establishment, are the security forces of America just so deeply infiltrated by MAGA, by foreign corruption, that the Democrats are just easily just blowing with that wind?
Well, I think the lesson to be taken out of this is that don't expect the political party to save your vote. That's why we have that site, saveyourvote.org. The Democratic Party had nothing to do with Biden's victory in Georgia, for example, as famously by 11,779 votes, so less than 12,000 votes. That was all done, for example, all these Georgians were challenged by both the state and purged from the voter rolls by the state. Many had their votes blocked or not counted by the vigilantes. And so a lot of these people came in, they thought they were given provisional ballots. Now, don't ever take a provisional ballot because I call it a placebo ballot. You think you voted, but you haven't. And the lady behind the desk, nice as she is, she may not know this. She'll say, don't worry, just fill out this. You don't get a regular ballot. Always demand a regular ballot. Say, no, I'm not accepting a provisional ballot. But if you get a provisional ballot, you have to fill out this form. Your ballot goes in an envelope. You fill out the envelope. Well, it's not going to get counted unless you personally go into your county clerk's office or follow whatever rule. In many states, you have to literally physically go in, and what they call it curing your ballot. What it means is that they didn't like your ID or they couldn't find you. So then you say, here's my latest government photo ID. Here's my proof of address, an electric bill or whatever. It's a whole process. But that was organized not by the Democratic Party. Thousands and thousands and thousands of ballots, provisional ballots were cured. Thousands of ballots that were being rejected, they forced those ballots to be hand counted, to be counted. That's how Biden got that margin. It wasn't the Democratic Party. It was the voting rights groups. I work, and you'll see in the film, I work very closely with Black Voters Matter, Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright. Black Voters Matter. I work with the NAACP. I work with the ACLU. I work with several, and of course, Rainbow Push. But the Democratic Party ain't there now. Which, in a way, for me, it's easier because I'm a reporter. I won't work with the Democratic Party, but they're invisible anyway. I'd have to hunt them down. Be an investigation. Where's the Democrats? Any Democrats here? No, I don't know. It's like, so don't count on the political parties to save you.
Gaslit Nation is here. You're not alone in the fight. Gaslit Nation hosts Come As You Are political salons every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Can't make it live? Recordings will be available to our community on Patreon. Our salons are your space to vent, ask questions, or simply connect with other listeners who also really, really hate Nazis. Since we're having such a great time, we're continuing through Inauguration Day. We're going to get each other over the finish line. Mark your calendars for our How to Make a Podcast workshop on Thursday, October 24th at 6 p.m. Eastern. This is your chance to learn the ropes and amplify your voice. Patrons at the Democracy Defender level or higher, submit your questions for our monthly big bonus Q&A show. You shape the show. Subscribe today for these fun perks and more, including our Victory group chat, bonus shows, and get all episodes ad-free. Discounted annual memberships are available at patreon.com/gaslit. Listen up, America. You have the right to vote. If you show up to vote and your name is not on the list, call the Election Protection Hotline at 1-866-687-8683. That's 1-866-687-8683. Save this number in your phone or go to vote.org. If the person at the polling station offers you a provisional ballot, call that Election Protection Hotline before proceeding and let them talk you through the best process to ensure your vote gets counted. Now spread the word that these states offer same-day voting registration. California, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Washington, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Virginia, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Same-day registration is allowed in North Carolina in the early voting period. It's all hands on deck, everyone. Gaslit Nation is phone banking into battleground states with Sister District every Wednesday in October at 6 p.m. Eastern, and with Indivisible Thursday, October 17 at 7 p.m. Eastern, and again on Election Eve. RSVP at the Gaslit Nation Survival Guide, or no, the Gaslit Nation 2024 Survival Guide on gaslitnationpod.com. To help deliver meals and supplies to those impacted by Hurricane Helene, donate to Feeding America at feedingamerica.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Andrea Chalupa. Our production manager is Nicholas Torres. and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle. Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smythe of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Ice Bear is Defiant, Sydney Davies, Work for Better, Prep for Trouble, Lily Wachowski, John Schoenthaler, Larry Gasson, D. Scott, Ann Bertino, David East, Joseph Mara Jr., Sean Berg, Kristen Custer, Kevin Gannon, Sandra Collins, Katie Masuris, James D. Leonard, Leo Chalupa, Carol Golstad, Marcus J. Trent, Joe Darcy, Ann Marshall, D.L. Singfield, Nicole Spear, Abby Rode, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, Mark, Sarah Gray, Diana Gallagher, Leah Campbell, Abby Zavos, Tanya Chalupa. Thank you to everyone who supports the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you. We're gonna win!